Welcome to Not Today Woodworking. This time, I'm going to show you how I made this picture frame for this art print. The story behind this art print is my wife and I were visiting a little town called Bisbee, Arizona, and she picked it up in an art shop that she really liked. So we brought it home. It's ridden around our house for a few years. I've been meaning to frame it for her, and I finally got around to it. I'm going to show you how I did it using scrap pieces of wood from previous projects and a little bit of wire and some screws. Stick around. I'm going to copy this piece of picture frame that I made before, but I'm going to invert the color. So I'm going to have wide pieces of maple with a thin walnut stripe going down the middle. First, I need to cut the wide pieces of maple, so I set the blade height, I set the fence to 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to cut 4 of them. The art print is 11 inches by 7 inches, so for all 4 sides, plus room for the diagonal miters on the end, I need about 44 inches of stock. These scrap pieces will yield me about 48 inches total, so just perfect. And there's the pattern: maple, walnut, maple. Getting the clamps out and getting ready for glue up. I'm going to lay out the pieces and lay them on their sides. Love, love, love these silicone brushes for small glue jobs. You can smear the glue around, let it dry on the brush, and just peel it off later for easy, simple reuse. So I'm going to use a lot of glue here and make sure that the surfaces are entirely covered so that there's no pockets or voids. The pieces will be bonded tightly together. Now that I've got glue on all the surfaces that are going to go together, I'm going to flip them on their sides and join them together. Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually cleaning up the inside where these 2 pieces of frame stock are touching so that I can clamp them both at the same time with the same set of clamps, but they won't glue together, right? Because this is 2 separate pieces of frame stock. I don't want them glued together, but this effectively doubles my clamps. Just checking the measurements of the print again, because now I'm going to cut a piece for the backing. What I want to do is I want to leave a 1/4 of an inch overhang on all the sides. That will fit into a rabbet on the back of the frame pieces. So here I'm just going to continue to check measurements for each side, draw the 2 lines for the edge of the print and the cut line. So now I'm going to go over to the table saw. I have a stop block set up so that the piece doesn't bind. I'm going to use my miter gauge to keep it at a right angle as I push it through the blade. Then I'm going to remove the stop block, adjust the fence, and cut the other 3 sides. And when I adjust the fence, I'm just doing that so that the blade is cutting right on the lines that I drew before. Now I'm cleaning off the finished piece with mineral spirits just to make sure that there's no dust and no oil or anything that's going to prevent the glue from sticking. And I'm going to set down some paper towels to catch overspray because I'm going to use a spray adhesive. And I'm going to get it set so that when I flip it over, it sets right in place. I'm using 3M Super 77 spray adhesive, get a nice coating on there, flip it over, align it nicely, and when I'm ready, gently press it down to make sure it's stuck nice and firmly. I'm being really careful not to transfer any overspray and dust from the table to my hands to the art print. And here you'll see I actually peeled it up and reapplied it because it wasn't straight. That's one of the benefits of spray adhesive, is you have a little bit of time to work with it. Now the glue's dry on the frame pieces, so they're out of the clamps, and I'm going to run them through the planer to make them perfectly smooth. Adjust the height of the planer again, run them through on their sides to clean up any of the burn marks from the saw blade, and also make the edges perfectly smooth and square. And here's what the finished pieces look like. Now I'm going to cut the rabbet, so I'm adjusting the blade height and the fence to be the same. I want a 1/4 by 1/4 rabbet, so the blade height is at 1/4 and the fence is at 1/4. I'm going to run the piece through 2 directions, and that will create the rabbet in the back of the frame. Now I'm working on the miter cuts. I'm going to measure each side and cut the pieces at the saw at 45 degrees. I'm measuring and referencing the picture so that I'm making sure that each piece that I cut is going to be the right length. I'm going back and forth between the picture to the saw, from the picture to the saw, and making cuts every time so that they come out as close as they can. One thing that's particularly important to pay attention to as you cut the miters is the orientation of the rabbet, because if you're not paying close attention, like I was, and you cut all your miters, and you go back to your piece, you might suddenly realize that you've cut the miters in the wrong direction. It up. Now you'll see as I set this piece down that the rabbet is actually on the long edge and it should be on the short edge. So I take it over to the table saw and I recut the rabbet on the inside of the pieces that I just mitered. Now I'm hoping that when I assemble it and put it together, you won't be able to see the erroneous rabbet on the back, and I think I pulled it off. Now it's time to assemble our frame and glue the pieces together. So what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of glue to each one of the joints. I'm going to brush it on with my silicone brush, and I'm going to make sure that it fits together tightly. I am going to use the aid of a brad nailer here to hold the pieces together while they dry. You absolutely don't need to use a brad nailer to hold the pieces together. A lot of people just use clamps. There are corner clamps, there are strap clamps. That's one thing I've been meaning to pick up for a long time, but I don't own it yet. So for simplicity's sake and for speed, I'm going to put a couple brads in each corner, one in each direction. One thing I ran into is that some of the brads blew out of the sides of the frame. It would have been better to use a shorter, smaller gauge brad or even a pin, but 18 gauge brads are what I had on hand, 18 gauge brads are what I used. Cleaning up the squeeze out here and get it all cleaned up as much as I can. And then I take it over and just use a grinder bit and my rotary tool to grind down the brads that blew out the sides. Giving it a sanding here with 150 grit sandpaper in my sanding block. Using a tack cloth to clean off the dust. And then for the finish here, I thought I'd try something different this time. I've used mineral oil to finish cutting boards, but I've never used it to finish anything else. I didn't want this to have a high sheen, so I didn't want to use a lacquer. And I didn't want anything that was going to take a long drying time. I just wanted this piece to be done and over with. So I thought I would experiment and oil it and see how it came out. And I like it a lot. Using some staples here to hold the print in. Now I'm going to use a couple of very short screws and a piece of wire to install the hanging hardware. Since I ran out of picture frame wire, I went and found some thicker gauge wire that I had laying around, and I thought I would give that a shot. It was a little beefy, so I had to use some pliers to bend it around the screws, but once it was on there, it seemed like it was going to stay. That'll work. So here's what we came up with. We used some scrap pieces of soft maple and walnut from other projects, and as you'll see, I made my fair share of mistakes along the way, but I was able to move on, incorporate those into the project, and I think we came out with something pretty nice in the end. I'm glad that we're finally able to frame this art print that we've had around for so long, and I hope my wife likes it as much as I do. If you like the video, please remember to hit the thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section below, and as always, remember to subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you next time. Stop laughing. Gotta hold still. Those are backwards!